Something truly unsettling has just unfolded in Montreal, and Ferrari didn't see it coming. Charles Leclerc, the team's golden hope, and one of the sharpest drivers on the grid, has suffered a crash that's done far more than ruin a practice session. It sent shockwaves through the garage, and what's worse, it's not just about broken parts or lost laps. This incident could throw their entire Canadian Grand Prix off balance. But here's the twist. It's not just Leclerc feeling the impact. Lewis Hamilton, in only his first season with the Scuderia, has now found himself directly affected by the fallout, without even touching the wall, because this wasn't just a crash. It was a domino effect, a moment of chaos that could leave both sides of the Ferrari garage scrambling. So before we break down how this happened, the full extent of the damage, and what it means for Ferrari's chances this weekend, go ahead and smash the like button, hit subscribe, and stick around until the very end. Because what just happened might not be the worst part. It's what comes next that could define Ferrari's entire weekend in Canada. And it all began just 20 minutes into free practice 1 at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. A track that's as unforgiving as it is iconic. Fast, narrow and ruthless. A slight misjudgment, and the wall is waiting. And unfortunately for Ferrari, Charles Leclerc found that out the hard way. It all unfolded in the blink of an eye. As Charles Leclerc approached turn 3 during free practice 1 in Montreal, everything seemed routine. A small lock-up, something we've seen 100 times before. He ran slightly wide, skipping across the chicane. For a split second, it looked like he'd gather it all up and continue as usual. Then came the critical misjudgment. The rear of the SF25 clipped the wall on the left-hand side. No sparks, no dramatic spin, no red flag waving in the air. From the outside, it looked minor, almost forgettable. But the real drama was unfolding behind closed doors, inside the Ferrari garage. When the car was brought back in and stripped down for inspection, engineers quickly realized something far more serious had happened. What looked like a routine brush with the wall had, in fact, compromised the very heart of the car. The survival cell, the central core of the chassis, the monocoque designed to protect the driver at all costs, was damaged. And in Formula One, that's not just an inconvenience, it's a full-blown crisis. Under FIA regulations, any damage to the survival cell means a mandatory chassis change. No patchwork, no workaround. The car has to be rebuilt from the ground up, which is why Ferrari had no choice but to pull Leclerc out of FP2 entirely. And the consequences are bigger than you might think. Skipping a practice session isn't just about losing seat time. It means no high fuel simulations, no tyre degradation analysis, no cross comparisons between softs and hards, no opportunity to experiment with race trim, with braking stability, with balance across stints. And it's not just Charles who pays the price. His teammate Lewis Hamilton suddenly finds himself shouldering twice the responsibility. At a team like Ferrari, both drivers share the development load during practice. They run different setups, different tyre plans, and then the data is merged to craft the ideal car configuration. With Leclerc's absence in FP2, all of that lands on Hamilton's shoulders. He becomes the lone data provider. Every adjustment, every tyre stint, every bit of feedback suddenly becomes more valuable and more pressurized. Commentator Martin Brundle captured the gravity of the moment perfectly when he said, "That was actually a big crash in terms of damage. It compromises Lewis and Charles through the weekend. FP3 will be super important." And he's not exaggerating. Ferrari now has just one final hour on Saturday morning to iron out everything they'd normally test across 2 full sessions. One red flag in FP3, one unexpected rain shower, and they'll be going into qualifying flying blind. For a team already under immense pressure, it's a massive blow. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Ferrari are nearly 200 points behind McLaren in the championship. They've yet to win a race this season. Expectations are sky high. The tension in Maranello is growing race by race. Charles Leclerc, who's delivered impressive pace in recent weeks, was hoping to maintain his momentum and continue challenging at the front. This crash and the subsequent chassis rebuild has derailed that effort completely. He'll go into FP3 with virtually no knowledge of how the car performs over longer runs, no confidence built, no rhythm established. And this circuit, the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, is unforgiving. Confidence here isn't optional, it's critical. For Charles, Saturday will now be a massive uphill climb. He'll need to jump in and immediately find his limits. No margin for error, one mistake, and the whole weekend could unravel. His focus will need to be razor sharp. And mentally, recovering from a Friday like this, where a minor mistake turned into a massive setback, won't be easy. But while Leclerc regroups, the spotlight now turns to Hamilton. Lewis came into Canada with a clear mission: to capitalise on recent upgrades, to push the SF25 to its limits, and to prove he can extract consistent performance from a car that's proven temperamental at best. But now he's carrying the weekend for Ferrari. Without Leclerc's setup comparisons, Hamilton must test everything alone. Different fuel loads, different downforce levels, tyre pressures, energy deployment settings, all of it. And with such limited time, every lap matters, every decision counts. If Hamilton can deliver under these conditions, it will be a huge statement. Not just to the fans or the media, but to Ferrari itself. A demonstration that even under pressure, even without a full team effort, he can still lead development, still extract performance, still push for results. Meanwhile, inside the garage, Ferrari's engineers face their own challenge. They're effectively running at half capacity, having to maximize setup development with a single car while simultaneously managing a full chassis rebuild. Every hour counts. Every mistake has magnified consequences. And all of this just hours before what could be one of the most critical qualifying sessions of the season. In short, Ferrari's weekend has been thrown into disarray. And yet, this is also where stories are written in Formula One. When things go wrong, when pressure rises, when drivers are forced out of their comfort zones, whether it ends in disaster or triumph, one thing is certain. From this point forward, nothing about Ferrari's Canadian Grand Prix will be straightforward. The team will regroup. Charles will return. Lewis will push. But the margin for error is gone. The stakes are higher than ever, and every single lap from now until Sunday will be a test, not just of the car, but of Ferrari's ability to adapt, survive, and fight back. And so now the entire paddock holds its breath. Because what just happened in Montreal isn't simply a minor Friday incident. It could be a defining moment in Ferrari's 2025 campaign. A test not of performance, but of resilience. Of whether this team, already bruised by months of disappointment and unmet expectations, can absorb another hit and fight back. For Charles Leclerc, the task ahead is monumental. Missing an entire session of running at a circuit as technical and unforgiving as Montreal isn't just a statistical loss, it's a psychological one. He'll step into FP3 knowing he has 1 hour, just 60 minutes, to find a rhythm, to rebuild trust in a car that bit him hard, and to re-establish himself as a contender before the lights go out in qualifying. The pressure is suffocating. There's no buffer, no margin, no warm-up phase. He's jumping into the deep end of a cold pool, and he has to swim fast or sink even faster. But while the spotlight may initially shine on Leclerc's recovery, it's Lewis Hamilton who now becomes the axis on which Ferrari's entire weekend turns. Because while the crash didn't involve him, the fallout most certainly does. With Leclerc sidelined in FP2, Hamilton has been left to carry the technical burden for the entire team. And in a team like Ferrari, that means everything: strategy, setup, tyre management, energy deployment. He becomes the sole reference point, the only active data stream, the only source of feedback the engineers can lean on as they prepare for a race that suddenly has become a high-stakes salvage operation. And that's no small burden. For a driver still adapting to a new car, a new culture, and a whole new set of internal politics, this is an inflection point. How Hamilton handles this moment could define not just his weekend, but his early chapter with Ferrari. Does he rise? Does he lead? Does he use the chaos as fuel to silence the doubters and make a statement? Or does the weight of expectation, multiplied now that his teammate is temporarily down, begin to crack through the armour? There's also a more uncomfortable question, quietly circulating behind the scenes, one that no one in red will want to say out loud. Was this just an isolated error from Leclerc? A routine mistake on a tricky circuit? Or does it point to something bigger, something structural? A team stretched too thin. A car with a performance ceiling too fragile to trust. An environment where even the smallest slip spirals into catastrophe. Because this is not the first time Ferrari has been thrown off course by a small incident with big consequences. And unless they manage to regroup quickly, it won't be the last. But perhaps the real story here isn't the crash. It's the response. Does Leclerc come back swinging, fearless and fast? Does Hamilton take the reins and steer the team through the storm? Does Ferrari show the unity and clarity needed to turn a nightmare?